Restaurant Unstoppable, inspire, empower, and transform the industry. With excitement, allow me to introduce to you today's guest back on the show for a second time, Krimsey Lillith. Krimsey, are you feeling unstoppable today?
I am, although I have no idea where I'm going, but you can't stop me.
Who does? I think we all kind of fake it till we make it, or just fake. I think a lot of us, some of us do have direction, but for the most part, we've all been there where we're like, what's next, right?
Yeah.
So the last time, actually, before I kind of set up the listeners to kind of discuss what we're going to be talking about today, why don't we get that motivational, inspirational ball rolling with a success quote or mantra? What do you got for us?
I would just like to remind everyone that we're all going to die.
Why is that? Why is that your mantra? Why is that what you want to echo today?
Well, personally, it just reminds me that like whatever I'm feeling scared of or like potentially, like, oh God, am I going to embarrass myself? I just remember that I'll be dead soon and no one will remember that embarrassing thing I did.
I think it's true. I think as humans, we blow our reality out of proportion. It consumes us. We're like the things that we think are a big deal, nobody else cares about.
Right. I mean, we all are the center of our own universe, but it's helpful to remember that everyone is in their own universe. It's not all about us.
Yeah, I think it's really easy to get in your own head. So that's a great way to get this thing started. And when I last connected with you, it was March of 2020. You were the owner of Krimsey's Cajun restaurant, the first ever vegan Cajun restaurant in the world. You had your own little cookbook that you put out, self-published, and you also were about to open a second location. You're operating in the black. Life was good. Then the pandemic hit. So where were you when I walked out the doors that day? If you guys want to check out my original conversation with Krimsey, it's episode 705. So you can head over to restaurantunstoppable.com/705, listen to that episode and get caught up if you want, and then come join us in where we are here. Or you can continue to listen, but it was a great episode. But where were you? Like, what happened the day that I walked out of your restaurant? Like, where were you? Where was your business? What was going on?
Well, business was great. We were on track to have our best year ever. I think a lot of businesses were around that time, actually, just the nature of the economy and such. But I also personally was feeling like, oh, it's flowing. Like we finally have all of our operations manuals done. Like it was like, check, 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 check. This is working. And then, gosh, it must've been like a couple of weeks after that, we started hearing more about the COVID thing, taking it a little more seriously. Masks started running out, and I thought, oh God, what is happening? And I decided to just sort of do my best and roll with the punches. And we operated basically as a takeout restaurant for a few weeks. And it only took a couple of weeks of that for me to realize this was just not what I wanted to be doing. And I didn't see it going away anytime soon. My landlord tried to convince me it would be gone in 4 weeks. I was like, I don't think so. Yeah. So I just halted everything and was like, this isn't what I want to be doing. I was kind of already, and stop me whenever, I'm kind of on a monologue here, so stop me whenever. But I think before COVID hit, I was already feeling a bit fatigued by just being responsible for a business, several years in. And owning a business is super hard and demanding. And so with this extra thing, I was like, you know what? I think this, if it's meant to be, it'll reopen in the future. But for now, I got to go.
So before the news of COVID hit, were you happy with your restaurant? I mean, you just mentioned that you're kind of fatigued. You're kind of, I think most people, 99.9% of people who are in this industry underestimate how hard it's going to be to run their own restaurant.
Yes.
Some more than others, but almost all of us underestimate how hard it's going to be. Was there any resentment at that point?
Resentment toward
opening your business, starting what you
No. I think, like you said, we always underestimate it, and it didn't matter how many people told me it was hard. I was like, yeah, but I'll be different. Like I'll have a great work-life balance and I'll figure it out.
Yeah.
And to an extent, I I think I did a pretty good job of that, but it was always a weight on me. Like no matter what, the shit always rolled downhill, and I felt downhill in the sense that I was supporting my staff, and I love my staff, and I love the restaurant. So I did whatever it took to keep it alive and make it successful. So I no, I don't resent the choice to open it. I think it was the only path to figuring out that that's not what I wanted to do. And that's a very important thing to know.
But at this point, when I was there interviewing you, sharing your story, you were on path. Like you were continuing. At this point, you weren't thinking it's time to close.
Not at all. I think I had thoughts of selling, but it was also it was more of a thought like, well, I need 2 more restaurants. And when I have 3, I'll think about like partnering up with another company or maybe selling these 3. I didn't think like selling 1 restaurant was an option, but I was sort of thinking about my exit plan.
Okay. So I should mention to our listeners that really what we're here to talk about today is when you know it's time to give up, or put it in your own words. What do you really want to communicate?
About when it's time to close?
Yeah. Like what is the subject line in Krimsey's words?
Well, I think there's like 2 paths. If you love what you're doing, then it's a lot different than my path. I think my path was the path of discovery, and I had been very goal oriented. So I had this kind of what you might call like a formal exit plan and like a strategy for eventually selling the business or partnering up. But I didn't take into account what I was doing and whether or not I actually liked doing it. Because I was so focused. Like even when we met, I was happy that it was successful. And I was like, yes, goals, check, check, check. But the day to day was just kind of running me dry. So that's kind of one path to exit, is just like, if you just can't do it anymore, then you might as well get out now, because actually exiting a business can take several years. I mean, I hear lots of stories about it taking 3 years from the moment when someone decides that they want out to actually offloading the business. And even then there's kind of a trailing off of like letting go.
Yeah. So take us to the point where you were like, okay, like here we are, however far into COVID, I'm not happy. This world of delivery only just isn't doing it for me. Like, take us through that. What was going on? Paint that picture.
I mean, it was total chaos. Not only for myself personally, like emotionally, but I had all these employees being like, what's happening? What are we going to do? And I didn't really have a lot of great answers for them, because I was trying to make some really important decisions on a very short time frame. So what I did was temporarily close for a couple of weeks. And I said, I just need a couple of weeks to like think about it. And it turned out to be good for everyone. A lot of people had sick days that that I was like, everyone's getting paid, you're going to get your sick days. So in my head, I was like, even if we close, they're all going to get paid for all this time anyway. But yeah, those 2 weeks off showed me a lot. And they also made me realize how stressed I was.
What did those 2 weeks off show you? When was this? Was this like mid-March, February?
Yeah, I think it was something like maybe even early April, like the very beginning of April. Yeah, after we had been running for a few weeks as takeout only. So yeah, once we decided to temporarily close and sort of like cleaned out the fridges and like, okay, we can put it all down, I realized that my body was just in this constant state of feeling stressed, even though nothing was happening. So I just like gotten used to feeling this way all the time. And now that there was nothing to be stressed about, it was still with me. And it was a huge wake up call. And I think I knew pretty quickly that I wanted to let it go, because it just felt so nice to have all of this like time and brain energy.
Okay. In that moment when you felt like it's time to let this go, what was the inner dialogue? Did you feel did you feel like
man, it was really complicated. I think there was the voice that I trusted the most was the one that was like, this isn't for you, let it go. But there were some really loud voices in my head that were like, you built this for your community and now you're just going to shut it down. That's kind of rude. Also, it's successful. So choosing to close a successful business is quite nuts to a lot of people, because it's kind of the goal, right? Like people struggle for so long to have a successful restaurant, and then to just be like, I don't want it. I think people were offended by it. Even more recently, before I deleted my social media, I got a couple messages that people were still angry about me closing the restaurant. So though all of those fears that people might feel like betrayed or let down, in a way they were true, but I realized that it wasn't my fear or my problem to take on. It was like I needed to take care of myself, and I have my whole life ahead of me, and I don't want to spend any more time doing something I don't want to do.
Yeah, I mean, in my mind, the things that I would think of, just like, are people going to think I'm a failure? Am I a failure if I quit? And I think so many people who are drawn to this industry are afraid of failure. We don't want to fail. What does it say about me? I don't want to be a failure. I work so hard. I'm proud of my work ethic. Like, I can't fail. And then when if you choose to quit, even if like you don't like it, you're not happy, it's not doing anything for you, we stick with it because of our ego, because we don't want people to think we can't handle it.
Yeah,
Did that cross your mind?
that was also a voice in my head. Just, like, even though this is your choice, a lot of people aren't going to perceive it that way. And I sort of just had to, in one big breath, just like, let it all go. It doesn't matter. And I mean, there were even people like trying to organize like fundraisers and stuff. And I was like, no, like, it's really not about that. This just isn't for me.
Yeah, this is a choice.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I was really excited when you came to me with this topic, because I just think that so many people like you, when you were getting started with Krimsey's Cajun Kitchen, like, this was your dream, this was your vision. Like, everything. How excited were you to like open? How bad did you want it? Can you remember back to that?
Yeah, I mean, everything went into this. I think that the idea of having this space where people could come enjoy this food, and more specifically vegan food, and sort of like change people's minds, and just create a place for everyone to hang out and have a certain experience, that really drove me. I think I moved to LA, and just a little over a year later, I was opening the doors to the restaurant. So that's, it's pretty fast for organizing something from nothing.
Yeah. So the topic of today's conversation is, when do you know it's time to close? So when do you know, in your opinion, when do you?
Well, I think I knew a long time before the moment that I actually chose to close. I think that I had known about 6 months earlier, and that's when, it was just a little bit too late to do anything about it other than just close. I think, in the book, the author talks about how it's important.
I should preface, because we haven't even mentioned the book yet. But I gave Krimsey homework, and she, like a champion in a week, just read this book, consumed this book. So the book is that Krimsey's referring to is Finish Big. Finish Big: How Great Entrepreneurs Exit Their Companies on Top. And this is written by Bo Burlingham. And Bo Burlingham is also the author of Small Giants. And he's kind of an advocate for companies who choose to stay small, because there's a certain essence, a certain culture that is hard to achieve when you get above a certain size, and that you can actually make a bigger impact with a smaller organization on the lives of the people in that organization if you choose to stay small. And this is his follow-up book, How to Finish Big. This is idea of so many people enter into the restaurant industry and they don't have an exit strategy. Their exit strategy is death. Like, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life, and I'm just going to do this until I die. But the reality is, like we pointed out earlier, 99.9% of people underestimate or miscalculate what the reality of owning a restaurant is going to be like. So I think it's really important that you go into opening a restaurant well-versed on how to get out of it. Like, what is your exit strategy? Are you going to, like, it's just really important. So I guess what I'm curious about, or what was your train of thought before I kind of set up the listeners to know what you're referring to the book?
Good question. I kind of got sidetracked thinking about what you were talking about, but I think, well, I'll just sort of go from there then. I think, so I hadn't read the book, but I did have some business background. So when I started the restaurant, like I said, I was sort of thinking about my eventual exit, but, by the end of it, I realized it was so opposite of what I wanted to be doing. It didn't matter like how well I set it up. I just couldn't do it anymore. And so I think really my mistake was more in the beginning side of just underestimating the amount of work, and like not realizing how important it was to have, at least a partner or a good support network. Like, I did it all on my own and just got so fatigued. But yeah, so I don't remember exactly what my point was specifically about the book. Can you mind reminding me where we
I'm
were?
sure it will come back. I don't
Yeah,
remember
it'll come
either,
back.
but
We'll
like
get there.
really, like straight up, like I like to say, restaurant unstoppable. Part of my mission, the mission statement is to inspire, empower, and transform the industry. But I also have a little like side mission to talk people out of doing this. And
Yeah. I think it can become very goal oriented in the sense that, like you mentioned, so many people, well, maybe you didn't say this today, but a lot of people who try to open a restaurant ultimately fail. So I think that we're not thinking about our exit strategy soon enough because we're just so focused on, I hope this works, so the goal is just to make it work. And then we sort of go from there.
So you said three things. You said you underestimated the amount of work it was going to be. You didn't have a partner, and you didn't have the support system. So reflecting back, you said like, what was your thought of what it was going to be like, and what was the reality of it? Like, what did you not expect? Like, what was the
Yeah,
work you didn't consider? Like, let's try to talk
that's
some
a really
people out
good
of it.
question. I think so I'll kind of tie this into a lot of the comments that people made when they found out I was closing the restaurant. One of the top things people said was like, why don't you just get a manager? And I think that was my thought going into the restaurant, that I could just hire a couple managers, set up a schedule for them, that eventually they would like run it for me. And I think, like a lot of other restaurateurs, the exciting part to me was building it, setting up a menu, just like getting everything in place. And then in theory, in a perfect world, I would have just been able to walk away. And I knew that wasn't totally possible, but I thought like, well, I'll get pretty close because I'll just hire great people. But the reality is I think you do need people right alongside you, like in the trenches with you, not people that you're managing directly.
People who have skin in the game, people who are
Yeah.
as invested as you are, people who have something to lose.
Yeah, exactly. And, my hope was that along the way, I would find someone like that, but I just never did. I'm not exactly sure why.
So I always say two people determine your growth: cash flow. Sorry, I always say two things determine your growth: people and cash flow. And I'm right there with you. Like I know my whole, when I was looking to start Restaurant Unstoppable, the idea was I'd start the podcast first, get the pod, because it was easier to start a podcast and to generate revenue from a podcast than it is to start a successful restaurant on your own. Let the cash flow from the podcast help be my cash flow to start the restaurant, and to surround myself with people who I could potentially partner with and open a restaurant. I mean, I still want to do that. I think my reality, like the knowledge I've garnered along the way, like I'm just not in a hurry to do it. Like I want to have cash falling out of my ears and a line of people waiting to work with me so I can find the right people and know that we have the cash to do it. I really do think that you need a partner to be successful today. So not everybody agrees with that statement. You can do it by yourself, but are you willing to do it by yourself is the question. What goes through your mind when I say that?
You totally can. And, obviously you can, but man, it's so exhausting. And I think that really good operators and operator partners are so hard to find, because you have to be like a certain personality to truly enjoy doing that every day and like keeping operations running smoothly. And so if you find someone like that, great, partner up immediately. But I think they're a lot fewer and far between than we realize. I thought that great operators were just like floating around waiting for a home. Not so much.
Yeah. So we're back, and we were just talking about how, people just completely underestimate the realities of what it is to run this industry, or to be in this industry, to be successful in this industry, the power of partnerships being totally necessary. Like I don't see you being able to compete at a high level, competitive level on your own. Unless you're a freak of nature, but let's be honest, most of us are not freaks of nature.
Yeah, at least not long term.
Exactly. You're going to burn out eventually. What about you said you didn't have the support structure. What do you mean by that?
So I had plenty of friends and family that made me feel supported personally, but I knew no one with a restaurant. I gradually built up my network after opening a restaurant, and reaching out to just random restaurant owners. And many of them I'm still friends with today. I love them. But
people are the best people. That's why I started.
They really are. And I wish that I could have built up those connections a little sooner. But it's also kind of hard to get taken seriously when you're trying to when you're trying to make friends with restaurant owners, she's like, I'm planning on opening a restaurant. And I'm like, okay, great. A lot of people are just really busy, and I get that. Because even when I had my restaurant, I'd have people reach out and say, like, I'm thinking about doing my own thing. Would you be down to catch up for coffee? And I'm just like, I cannot, nothing personal, but I just currently is not a good time for me, and probably no time this year.
Yeah, I get it. But I mean, you bring up a good point. I think that a lot of people are afraid to reach out to other restaurateurs because of the reasons you just listed, and those reasons are valid.
Yeah.
But it never hurts to try to reach out. And oftentimes, the more successful they are, the more time they actually have.
That is true.
Because they've replaced the reason why they're successful is because they've learned to lean on systems, processes, procedures, and they've surrounded themselves with a team of people. And they attract people. That's what they do. That's why you're interested in talking to them, and they're good at making time for people. So I wouldn't let that discourage you from reaching out to restaurateurs.
No.
Yeah.
I think I think a lot of people either want to make time and do, or want to make time but can't. But I don't know, I never was like, oh my God, I can't believe they wrote me this message. I was more like, wow, I'm really honored that they love my place and they'd like to chat. I wish that I had more time. One tip for reaching out is having a specific question. I'll throw that in. Like, if you're like, I'm thinking of opening my own place and I'm looking at A versus B, it's a lot easier for whoever you're messaging to sort of like have a reply rather than an open call of like, would you like to meet up? It's a little easier to respond to that.
Yeah. Also, what skill set, what asset, what value do you bring to that restaurateur? Hey, I would love 30 minutes of your time. In exchange, I'm really great at fill in the blank, and I would love to reciprocate some way and help you out.
That's great. Or even offering to bring coffee over. There were a couple of times where I was like, hey, can I stop by, bring you a po' boy, and we chat for like 10 minutes? And that works.
Yeah. So what, in your mind, if you could have created this support system or the support structure that you're lacking, what would that have looked like? What would you have
actually, Eric, you didn't set this up, but it's going to sound like you did, because after discovering your network, I'm like, this is exactly what I would have loved to have. Just like a very restaurant specific group of people that all care about each other and providing feedback. I saw someone had in the message board or the feed or whatever you want to call it, they were talking about their first day open, and like, I had these problems with toast, and like, people are chiming in like, oh yeah, we same problem, or like, we should do this or that. And that's exactly what I would have loved to have.
Well, thank you for the plug. That was not scripted. So I invite all my guests to the network because I know the value of a network is only as good as the people in it. So, and if I have somebody on the show, they get an automatic lifetime access to the network, because I'm just trying to put amazing people into the network. And my mission with that network is to connect leaders with the next generation of leaders. So it's slowly and steadily growing. I think we have 170 people in the network, and all my past guests get invitations to that network. And we do peer mentoring sessions, so you can literally connect with my guests. I'm gonna stop trying to sell the network now, but I mean, it just lines up. Like, you need a support structure. You need people to go to who get it, because often, like, you might, even if you have a great like group of friends in an area where you're opening a restaurant, it's like being a single, like I'm single and all my friends have kids, and I go to hang out with them and I'm like, I have no idea what you guys are talking about.
Right.
I can't relate. It's the same thing with owning a restaurant. It's a child. And unless you own a restaurant, you just can't relate. So you need people to talk to. You need people who will understand. Absolutely. So yeah, I mean, I wasn't even trying to bring the network into this, but I could see that. That connection. But if you didn't have the network and you wanted a network, what would that have looked like for you in your community?
If I could have set up the perfect network in imaginary land?
Yeah.
Well, I would have loved to.
The better question is, what kind of network do you think you need to open a restaurant to have the support you need?
Okay. Well, yeah, like we mentioned, I think having a partner is critical. I went into it with the opposite attitude of like everyone who had a bad partner experience was like, you don't want to be dealing with all that. Just own the whole thing. You don't have to worry about any partner doing anything weird. It's all yours. You can control everything. So I was like, oh, that sounds nice. Yeah, sure. But again, I severely underestimated the amount of work it would take. And there were so many nights I went to sleep wishing I had a partner. So that would be first and foremost. I think beyond that, I don't know that you need more than one partner, but you do need to share the load. But I would have loved to also have some sort of like advisory board set up in whatever way made sense. But just a team of people that could help me with things. And I eventually sort of assembled this team, but important was like bookkeeping and accounting. I started doing it all myself and quickly realized like, this is a terrible idea. And then like someone on call for legal stuff and HR things. I would have also just liked to have like a couple mentors that could somehow derive benefit from like being a mentor to me. I don't know exactly what I could offer them back, but now that I'm on the other side, I would be happy to mentor someone. And I think that, it's kind of like you work with the Boy Scouts or the Girl Scouts or whatever. It's kind of the same feeling of like, you just want to give back somehow. So I'm sure those people are out there, but yeah, that would have been a great team. I think I also would have loved to have a manager or two for the restaurant that were involved in the company financially to sort of give them a piece. And that was a goal for what I was trying to do. I wanted to give them pieces, but it just never quite worked out. So if I were somehow able to have general managers that were involved in the company financially, that would be awesome.
Yeah. So I'm curious. I did give you homework, and I've never given my guests homework, and you received it so graciously. After reading the book, Finish Big, would you have opened your restaurant any differently? Are there any like lessons you picked up from that book that you wish you had known, or perspective that you garnered from that book that you wish you had known before opening? And would you have exited your business any differently?
I actually, not so much. I think that maybe like some of the technical things about what I had planned for the exit might have changed, but the overall philosophy would have been the same. I think that for me personally, it just came down to like, oh, whoops, I'm doing something I don't want to do. I better fix that. And I couldn't hang on another couple of years to make it work, especially through COVID. But in reading that book, there were a couple things that jumped out at me that I found kind of funny that are really true. Towards the end of the book, Bo talks about how once you've run your own business, it's going to be really hard to go back to work for someone else. 100% true. And also it's going to be really hard to ever want to manage anyone again. And I totally agree with that. So I guess it would have been nice to know going in that once you own your own business, you're kind of wrecking your chances for assimilating back into the normal corporate structure. So your options on the other side are a lot different than, it'll be really hard to just go back to work,
Yeah. So how did you exit your business? Did you just like walk away?
I mean, I would like to call it, I walked away responsibly, but okay. More or less, I just sort of dropped everything. I had 2 leases, one on the new restaurant that we were about to start construction on. And
I think you didn't start the construction, huh?
Actually, I was meeting with the contractor, going over the plan, and we were considering demoing the following Monday, starting the demolition process. And I was like, you know what, let's just pause a minute and see what happens with this whole COVID thing, because it was so new. So I'm glad that we made that call.
Actually, I want to come back to this, but I think before we really start to unpackage how you walked away and what you did to do that responsibly, just get back into that mind. Like, what you took 2 weeks off, right? You took 2 weeks off to just the plan at that time. What was the original plan when you took the 2 weeks off? Just to get like a mental break, to give your employees a mental break, for you to, were you on the fence at this point? Did you think maybe you do want to close it, but you weren't ready to say it out loud? And
yes.
You take some time?
That's exactly it. I think that I knew that I was going to close, but it felt like too abrupt. So also I hadn't in my head, that wasn't, obviously in hindsight, it's a lot easier to see, but at the time I was like, I don't know what I want to do. And I truly felt that way. So for me, it was just a break. And it was at the, my partner had suggested it. My boyfriend, not my business partner, obviously. My boyfriend was like, why don't you just take some time off, see how it goes? Because he's been watching me for years. And I think he also knew it was time to close, but he better not say it. So I followed his advice, took the 2 weeks off, and it became crystal clear. But, the funny thing about that is, even after I decided to close, I woke up one morning and was like, no. and totally reversed all of my plans, started making phone calls, was like, we're opening back up, like we can do this, we're going to make it work. And, the universe simply wasn't having that, because I just hit roadblock after roadblock after roadblock. And about 3 days into my new plan, I realized like, it's time to close. It really is.
Yeah. So you make the decision to close. What does closing responsibly look like?
So I don't, it was my first closing responsibly. So I had to learn a lot. I had a few friends in real estate. And so I chatted with them about, like, what are my options here? Because in my new location, I had not even paid a month of rent. I was still in the free rent period, followed by a 5-year lease. So, I was like, am I in big trouble, or like, what does this mean? And what everyone in the real estate industry told me was, what you could really do is give your landlords a big finger and just walk away, because they're in a tight spot too. And there's nothing that they can do about it.
The pandemic was almost a blessing in disguise for a lot of people, because there were a lot of people in your shoes who were like, I'm profitable, I'm doing the work, but I'm not happy. And now the pandemic is not, I'm not fucking up. The pandemic screwed me. It's not my fault. I'm not failing. This is my opportunity to get out and to be able to point my finger at, the pandemic is the reason why I closed. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. I don't think people talk about that. They're like, they say all these closures. I'm like, how many people
I agree. I think
look at this as a blessing in disguise.
There were definitely, I mean, I don't know for sure, but I would have to say there were probably a lot of people who viewed this as an opportunity, and myself included. And yes, the pandemic technically was part of it, but to me, I hate to call the pandemic a blessing. It's touchy, but for me personally, it just all became very clear, and I was like, this is my moment. Like, if I hold on any longer than right now, then I'm going to be stuck with it, and this is a great opportunity to just drop everything.
And I should point out, yes, there are a lot of people who want this industry, who do love this industry, who had no plans of ever leaving the industry, who were forced out because
there are a lot of sad stories to go on.
I do want to recognize those people, and I don't mean to sound insensitive, but
a lot of people lost a lot, and I lost a lot too, but I guess it didn't feel so bad because it was my choice. But yeah, I didn't want to really give my landlord's finger and walk away, because I had good relationships with both of them, and they're struggling too. It's all like one big struggle together. So we negotiated on amounts that felt good to both of us, which felt fair. And the rest of the stuff was a lot easier to untangle, because I didn't have any debt with the business. And everything else was just kind of like cancel subscription to that, cancel subscription to that. The hardest part was definitely just the employees. And there was no way for me to possibly ever explain to them how difficult this was for me and how difficult I knew it was for them. I did my best. But yeah, so I just made sure that everyone, once the business was closed, I made sure everyone was able to get on unemployment. If they needed help filing, I helped them with that. And, to be honest, I think a lot of the employees viewed it as a little blessing too. Again, I know that there were a lot of rough times for everybody, but the silver lining for them was that they now get to sort of have this time off, and that's another thing that is sort of a touchy subject to talk about, because politically it's a bit charged, but I think a lot of people were able to find a way to benefit from this just sort of pause. And
I would say that humanity in general, especially Western humanity, with the culture of go, work. We're blind to it because it's all we know, but relative to different cultures, like, we work so much, like, for what,
exactly.
We're blind to it. So I think that, there are silver linings to the pandemic. It's devastating, but there are absolutely silver linings. And this is one of them. It forced everybody to go, and we
sit down, take a deep breath,
and to be around like our loved ones, to be forced around our loved ones, to isolate and to quarantine with our loved ones, and to, breathe and to reflect and to dream new dreams and to say, what do I really want to do next? Employees and owners.
Actually, I watched, it's been really cool to watch our employees, because, everyone didn't just scramble and like go get a new restaurant job. A lot of them chose to like take completely different paths, or like go to school. And or have babies. So yeah, I think this pause was awesome. And, for me and for the employees, it gave us some time to just not worry about money and just think about like, what are we doing here?
So I think I might have missed it. And if you did touch on this, you said like how to close responsibly. You didn't just give your landlords a finger. What are the things like the tech, like if somebody's listening to this right now and they're like, I'm thinking about closing, I'm resonating with Krimsey's words. What did you learn from this experience that you learned the hard way that you could prevent somebody else from making the same mistake or not being blindsided by something?
Yeah. Well, this is another thing Bo touches on in the book, but just being like, I don't know what the appropriate level of transparency is for communicating with your employees. I feel like I took some sort of middle ground, like, hey, everyone, I need some time to think. I'm not sure what I want to do. And there's sort of like some read between the lines stuff there, right? And then when I decided that it's what I wanted, I was very clear about that. But then I sort of confused them all by being like, wait a minute, who wants to come back to work? So it's like, whoa, I can imagine how chaotic that probably was for everyone. So I would say that just be very diligent about your communications with everyone, but especially your employees. And
what is diligent communication?
meaning like what I mean by that is just think carefully about what you're saying and why you're saying it. I think that in general, I tend to be like super transparent. And in this case, there were areas where I held back because I felt like I should. And then other areas where I overshared. And in hindsight, I wish that I had a better plan before I just dumped it on my employees.
Yeah. And it's kind of like most people listening to this, not everyone listening to this has closed a restaurant, but I think most people listening to this have been in a relationship.
Yeah.
Where one day you're like, I'm over this person. This is done. I don't ever want to go back to it. Then a day goes by and you're like, but I still love them.
Right.
And it's like, it's kind of like that. And like, you want it back, and it's going to be a roller coaster of emotions. Like you're going to have days where you're like, no, this isn't where I'm not compatible with the restaurant industry. It's not right. But then you're like, but my customers and the things I do love. And like it's going to take time for you to like find an equilibrium, a place where you really do truly land. But until then, it's going to be high peaks and valleys until it like
for sure. And one thing I am glad I did is that I kept all communications completely open to everybody. It wasn't like, I'm only telling the leads and then, of course, information gets trickled down to everyone. It felt good to do it in that way, that we're all kind of a group understanding what was happening together.
Yeah. And just like in a relationship, you don't want to tell your partner when you're having a bad day, this is over,
Yeah.
I never want to talk to you again. And then the next day you're like, I was just having a bad day. Like, will you come back to me?
Yeah.
It's just like that. It's people, it's emotions, it's feelings, it's planning. This is my life. Like if you're not in my life, then I need to think about what's next. I need to think about my next job or my next partner.
Right.
So it's a really good analogy.
Yeah, I think it'd be tempting to hold on to that information too, because you don't want people to start going like, oh, well, what's my next thing? But I truly think that it's better to tell everyone and just sort of deal with what happens after, because if you've done a good job with your team and it truly is a place where people feel cared for, they're not going to jump ship as fast as you think they are. In fact, there were people at the end just like employees really wanting to help me with everything. They surprised me with how much they cared about me and the business.
Yeah. So back to the book, Bo's book, Finish Big. I would say the front half of that book is much more appropriate for most of the people who are listening to this podcast. The second half of that book is all about EBITDA and like big companies and like you're making over $25 million a year with all of your assets type of companies. And that's not everyone who's listening to this, but the front end of that book definitely, I think, relates to most people, and they make some really good points. One of the big lessons I learned from that book, and maybe you can reciprocate with another lesson you learned, is does your business hinge on you? And I think a lot of people, if you're going into business and you want to sell your business as an asset, does your business need you to survive? And I think a lot of people, especially chefs who build brands around their skill set, find themselves in a position where it's hard for them to sell because their business, they are the business. So ask yourself, do I really want to center a business around me and my skill sets? or do I want to create systems around a thing done really well and where I can remove myself from that? What are your thoughts as I'm sharing this?
Well, you're sort of making me think about a mistake that I did make, which was thinking that this business didn't need me. Because when I went into it, like I said, I had plans for like, oh, it'd be cool to open 3, and then who knows what happened from there. But I sort of had like a rough 5-year plan. But what I didn't realize that one of the things that gave me the most joy was connecting individually with customers and employees and creating the space that I could also be a part of. So when it began to grow, I realized that I was taking the joy out of it for myself. So, and it's really difficult to say if they actually needed me, but like, I guess I needed them. So my original plan made no sense. Basically, that was a mistake I made, is not realizing which parts I would like.
Were there any lessons from that book that you weren't previously privy to?
I think some of the details, but overall, yeah, not particularly. I think, but it was cool to hear it formatted so well. And I wish that I would have read that whole book before I started, just to sort of have more of a roadmap. I think that I piecemealed all of that stuff together over 4 years that I was in business.
Okay. It's definitely, I think, a must read for anybody who's going into business. I think a lot of it in the middle and towards the end is going to fly over your head. Even me, over the past, I listened to the book on audio over the past 5 days just to be prepared for this conversation, and my eyes were crossing towards the end. It can be a little convoluted, and you can get lost in the minutia. But if you're looking to scale a big business and you do eventually want an exit strategy, it's a book that's worth powering through and really trying to understand what they're talking about, for sure. So you mentioned, like, what happened after you closed? Like, what was your plan? Like, did you have a plan? Did you have money put away? Like, were you able to sell? Did you have any assets that you could sell and get money? I mean, how were the assets even easy to sell during a time where restaurants just weren't?
Yeah, no, not at all.
What
I think, it's perhaps the worst time ever, financially speaking, to close a restaurant, because no one is interested in buying. No one wants your stuff. There's stuff everywhere. So the assets I did have, like equipment, just I left with my landlord as part of our lease negotiation or termination. And I did lose money that year, but yeah, it didn't really feel that important, because I was kind of free, I was like, from free.
So I'm going to ask you some personal questions, but I think it's important to talk about this stuff. What kind of nest egg did you have put away before opening Krimsey?
So yeah, and I'll be very transparent about that. I had my 401k, which I didn't really want to touch, but I had a couple $100,000 in there. I wound up touching it to open the restaurant, which I opened the restaurant on about $30,000, what a lot of people call shoestring budget.
Well done.
Yeah, and it was very. I'm glad that it went that way, because I think that if I had had more money, it would have been a different restaurant, and I liked how it turned out.
Yeah.
So yeah, I had that to start with, I don't know, I probably had like $50,000 in my account, because I had just come from like a regular salary job.
You had a few $100,000 put away in your 401k. You had $50,000 of cash in a checking account.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so
this is all before opening.
This is before opening. So we opened, and the first couple months, I mean, I wouldn't say they went well. I would say that we just sort of like barely maintained. And in my mind, I had like a break even number. We need to make this much per day just to like not be losing money. And we were just like hovering right under that line. And so I started to get a little stressed out and started wondering, like, am I going to have to dip into my 401k again? And if so, would I do that, or would I just walk away? And I think I didn't have to get quite there, but I had sort of mentally committed to, like, I'm not going to just keep digging in the hole if this isn't working. But, luckily it caught on and things turned around and, surpassed my wildest dreams. And that was really great. And the business was making money, but I wasn't taking much of it out personally. I was sort of just like setting it aside to use I was planning to open the second restaurant with cash, and just stay out of debt. Because I generally, I like to kind of live my life out of debt. I think it's just extra stress that I don't want to deal with.
Yep.
So I try to live
You're
within
bringing up
my
a
means.
huge point though, that we didn't even talk about, which is a huge part of this. Don't open a restaurant unless you have cash reserves, backup plans, like security. And most people are barely scraping by. They're living paycheck to paycheck, and if they have a couple bad weeks, they're done. You know.
Yep.
The other thing that having that cash reserve, having a couple $100,000 security, even though you don't want to tap into that, but by having that there is also, now you can walk away if you have to, if it's
Right.
right. And we don't think like that for some reason. We don't give ourselves, we don't have this, it takes a year sometimes to get the loyal customer base that you need to stay in the black, you know. And by having that nest egg, by having $50,000 put aside for you to cover your own liabilities for a year, or to cover the liabilities of your employees, like we're always so undercapitalized when we get started. So I think the first thing you did that was the best thing that you could have ever done is gone into the restaurant overcapitalized, and you're still even then being conservative.
Yeah. Yeah. I was always very conservative. I assumed we would not make any money for like 6 months and then we would close. So when that's your expectation, anything above that is great.
So by having that cash reserve, it made it easier for you to walk away. It's safe to say.
Yeah, for sure. I think, I have a few friends that I talk to about closing the restaurant, friends in the industry. And, I would say like, I don't think this is for me, and I'm feeling stressed about it. And I don't know if I'm making the right decision. And they're like, well, if it makes you feel any better, we don't have a decision. Like, this is our livelihood. And if we would go completely bankrupt right now to get out of this, and we have no other way of making money, like this is what we do. So yeah.
How much of a hit did you take, if you don't mind me asking? Well, how much of a loss was Krimsey?
Yeah. The year we closed, on my taxes, I lost $70,000.
So you lost $70,000 on your taxes. I could be better when it comes to accounting. Was there any other loss that you had? Like, was there net loss, or overall, did you break even?
Well, I mean, like overall running the business was profitable. We were making about 20% profit on our sales. And the year before we closed was like 1.3 something million in sales. So we were making money, but the year that we closed, we only had like a couple of months in the beginning, and that didn't nearly offset just the cost of like getting out of leases and like early termination fees. I had just bought like new POS equipment that I now owed money on. A lot of stuff like that. It adds up. And then before you know it,
the approximation from the amount of money that you put in, that you invested in your POS, the amount of money that you invested in, or the hit you took on lease, breaking your lease and all that.
Okay. Yeah, I think on the both leases combined, I think I took a hit of about maybe like $35,000-$40,000.
Is that factored into the 70,000 on your taxes?
Yeah. So all of that was included. And then, my POS, I mean, if anyone's bought a POS, you know how crazy expensive they are, but I think I owed like 8,000 on that.
Toast.
And then
I remember you using Toast.
Yeah. Toast. Yeah. We had just gotten a new system. Like I want to say like a couple of months ago or something. And then sort of just like these random costs of like, I needed to hire someone to come take down the sign. I needed to hire someone to do this and that. And all of that quickly adds up. I mean, it's the same as like when you're opening a business, just before you know it, you've accidentally spent double your budget. Closing goes the same way.
Now, with the hardware from the POS, did you guys have a KDS or anything like that in the background, or in the kitchen?
Yeah, we had 2 kitchen display units, handheld tablet, and like a main POS.
Well, printers and things like that.
Yeah, and printers and stuff. Yeah. But those, I mean,
sell that to another restaurant? Because I feel like,
no, you would think so. I think part of it was COVID, and there was just a surplus of these.
Sitting on those?
Huh?
Are you still sitting on those assets?
I eventually sold them for $500.
We got some listeners. I might be able to.
I know if I had known about this, it would have been a great place to post them. But yeah, I mean, I basically gave them away about 6 months ago because I was moving. And I was like, can't keep these in the garage anymore.
Yeah. So are you going to keep the Krimsey sign and put that like on your, like in the basement someday?
Well,
or on the
actually, I have one piece of wood sitting over here by me. And it's something I'm just like, I'm like, no, I'm not letting it go, but I have no idea what I'm going to do with it.
After you did close, and after you took your hit of $70,000, and I'm not going to say $70,000 was just a drop in the bucket for you. I mean, that was a good chunk. It was a good chunk. Yeah. But you still have some liquidity, like you still have money put away, a runway to figure it out. What's next, right?
Yeah.
I
Yeah. I
remember
think
seeing like social media, like I remember seeing you on social media, like it looked like you were living your best life. Like you're roller skating every day. You're going like,
it was fantastic. I mean, yes, money doesn't solve all the problems, but what's the quote? Like it solves a lot of problems, something like that. Money helps everything. So I had enough, my 401k was still there as a padding, and I had been contributing to it over the years, which by the way is very important. I didn't pay myself for the first couple of years and then was like, what am I doing? So I'm glad that I had done that. And then I had cash in the bank and stuff. And so I had all this time to just explore. And, the funny thing about it is I wasn't worried about money because I live pretty modestly and I don't need a lot of things. And whatever, my life is pretty cheap. And even then, well, I think because I wasn't stressed about money, like ways to make money sort of just came. Like as I got curious about things, and in 2020, a lot of people were talking about crypto, and I was like, oh, let me throw a little money in there. And then, later in the year, I was like, let me throw a lot of money in there. Let me throw all my money in there, which is not great investment advice, but my point is, because I just had time to be curious and like learn things. I took a class, I learned to play a violin, just all these kind of things I was dabbling in. I found these like natural paths to building more skills and finding other ways to make money. And I think I like it this way.
so wait, yeah, that's a good point. Like when you finally cut all ties and you're Cajun kitchen free, what was your strategy going forward? Like what was your plan? Like did you have a plan, or were you just
No. That was the scariest part. Yeah, the scariest part was closing, but not really having a plan, which, again, in Bo's book, he talks a lot about when it's time, you have to be setting yourself up. But I was not set up at all. I suddenly had like nothing to do. And I just had to sort of start from scratch. But I think that's fine. That's how it was for me. I for several months, I would sleep like 11 or 12 hours a night. And, I can't really explain that. I don't think that's exactly how sleep
for lost time?
Yeah. But I just loved sleeping. And then I slowly like sort of came outside and was like, oh, what is everyone doing out here? I started playing beach volleyball.
Did you say you're depressed, or were you relieved after this?
No, I was so happy. I think just the feeling of freedom is like the opposite of depression. And I've been actually getting personal again. When I had the restaurant, maybe in like that must have been 2018-ish, I got super depressed and started having suicidal ideations. And, I wound up getting help, but that I know what depression feels like. And this was the exact opposite. It was like the whole world is in front of me. I can do whatever I want. Like all the doors are open, and now I just get to figure out which one I want to walk through.
Yeah, I mean, but what I loved about your story when I asked, like, did you have a plan? Did you have a strategy? Just doing things, just experiencing things. And that's the advice I'd give to somebody who's just coming out of high school. And notice I did not say culinary school or like college, because I do not suggest going to college or culinary school if you want to become a restaurateur. Just go work for people, and ask lots of questions and read lots of books, but also give yourself perspective. Go work for a lot of different people. Go try as many different things as possible. And guess what? If you have a lot of school loan debt, that's not an option, because you then become, liable for paying that debt and not getting experiences, right?
Yeah.
But it sounds like what you were doing is just that. Like you were just giving yourself experiences, and kind of just in giving yourself experiences, trying to find a new path.
Yes. And I love your advice to not go to college if you want to open a restaurant. I think actually we send kids to college way too early.
For sure.
And I'm a prime example of that. I graduated when I was 17 years old and went straight to school and like picked a job. And then I did that for a few years. And obviously that didn't work out. I switched careers, opened a restaurant. But like, I think the key to finding long-term happiness and sustainability in your job is having the freedom to dabble in this and that, and then see what wakes you up, and not do a job just because the salary's good or because it's going to make you feel smart or put you in the right places. It's like, no, truly, when you do it, lights you up and puts you in some sort of state that you forget you're doing it. And it's different for everybody. And how can you
You found
possibly
that
know?
in this new, are you still searching for that, or have you found it? Or
I think I'm still searching for it, but I think, just as important as it is to notice what lights you up, I think you also have to notice what drains you. And so a lot of this process has been like, how does this feel? It's fine. Or like, how does this feel? Definitely a no. Okay, great. Now we know it's a no. We can move on from that. So I feel like I'm sort of like bouncing back and forth towards something that I don't know what it is yet, but it
kind of feel
feels,
the same exact way, even though I still have Restaurant Unstoppable and it's better than ever and things are good. Like there's a lot of pressure. I feel a lot of pressure right now because I don't believe my own success. And I know that at any moment the world can change
yeah,
and podcasting might not be a big deal, or there's going to
yeah,
be a way better podcaster out there who does exactly what I do or whatever, or I say something that offends somebody or a lot of people, which is very possible. I'm waiting for that to happen at any moment. And that I could, like, my sponsors could pull or anything. So I'm thinking, like, how do I, especially after listening to the Finish Big, like, Restaurant Unstoppable kind of hinges on my skill set and my ability to put out content. What happens if I get sick or I lose my voice or like whatever million things could happen? Like I need to think like what next. But at the same time, I'm so afraid of doing something just for the sake of making money that I end up hating my life. Because right now I love it. I mean,
yeah,
in I mean, in full transparency, Restaurant Unstoppable grossed $200,000 this year. I didn't net that. I net $80,000, which is more money than I've ever made, and more money than I'm so happy to be making that, talking to people. You know what I'm saying?
yeah.
But do I need more? Do I want more? Like I
Doesn't
get
he
to
talk
work
about that in the
35.
book too?
I travel the country. I talk to interesting people. I get to learn exactly what I want to learn about. Like, and I have this key. This podcast is a key to open doors to get access to people I normally wouldn't get access to. And I work about 35 to 40 hours a week. You know what I'm saying? And it's on when I feel like working. Do I really want to scale? Do I really want
Yeah.
to get bigger? Do I really want to take on more? Or can I just recognize what I have right now and just choose to enjoy it? It's tough. So I kind of, does that relate with where you are right now?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like your financial needs are met and you're doing what you love. And I think that that's where opportunities come from. I mean, like I could have never expected that a publisher would approach me and ask me to write a book, and they did. And, the investment opportunities I've had, I would have never guessed that they were coming, but they came because I was curious and open and I had no goal in mind. I was just sort of exploring. I even made an investment in another company, like as an angel investor. And all of these things just came because I was just doing my thing and not too worried about it. So yeah, I agree. If you're doing what you like and you're not strapped for cash, then that you've made it.
Yeah, and I have a free, complete autonomy right now.
Yeah.
So I'm very hesitant about how I go into the future because I don't want to sacrifice what I have to make more money. You know what I'm saying? But I don't know. This isn't about me. It's about you.
No, I think Bo said something in the book too. Like, if you don't know how much money you need or want, then it'll never be enough. Just like, sort of
Absolutely.
laying out what's necessary and like, what would you do if you had more money?
Mm-hmm. There's a couple other things I wanted to talk to you about, but is there anything else that we've learned about as far anything we have not discussed yet relative to when it's time to close, or lessons you learned that could help our listeners? And if not, then we'll take another break and we'll come back to discuss a few other things.
No, I think we covered. I just think that, if there are people out there thinking about closing their restaurants, that you really need to listen to that voice. And, even if you don't wind up closing, there may be some things you can do to make it more enjoyable for you, but you have to do those things. The longer you sit in this in-between area, it's just going to get worse and worse. It doesn't get better.
Yeah, the only thing I want to add on to that, to compound off what you just shared, is ego, I think, is more prevalent in this industry than in other industries. And the reason why we don't quit or we don't stop when we should and we just get into a bigger hole is because of ego, because we don't want to be a failure. And it's funny because like all other industries, I mean, I started learning before I ever started the podcast, I was listening to all these interviews of successful restaurateurs, of all these successful entrepreneurs, just sharing knowledge about how they became successful as entrepreneurs. And in those interviews, failure was such a big part of their success, and they embraced failure, and they're like, fail fast, like go try things, fail fast, start small, fall on your face as much as possible.
Yeah.
And in this industry, it's almost the opposite. We're almost not privy to that because the initial operating, the initial costs just to get open, you're taking out hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's hard to start small. But I don't also think, at the same time, I don't think that's true, because I think we just have told ourselves that we have to have this big 150 seat brick and mortar restaurant to be successful. But we can start where we can, which is just a pop-up or anything like that, and like let cash flow and people and failures determine your growth. What's going through your mind as I say this?
No, it's just all really good advice. I think like it's funny, we're kind of coming full circle, like how to close and how to open. But yeah, that's how we got started. It was like farmers markets, stands, catering, festivals, and then a 900 square foot restaurant, and then a 1,600 square foot restaurant, and then working on expanding from there. I think that's how you do it.
But the point, don't let your ego get in the way. Know that it's okay to fail. Don't let that failure identify or just define you, right?
Yeah.
Know that it's much easier to quit when you're smaller.
It is. Yeah. I kind of wish I'd listened to my voice inside a little earlier, but like you said, the restaurant industry it's tough in the sense that, you hear a lot of these messages like, well, you just got to grind and like, don't quit and like, keep working at it. And it sort of like clouds your own judgment, but you got to remember, like, this is your life. And again, you're going to die. And like, is this how you really want to be spending all of your days? Just like hating what you're doing.
When you reached out to me initially to say, hey, Eric, hobby band, I'd love to come back on the show to talk about closing my restaurant. And I won't lie, when I noticed you closed, I was like, what the hell? I just had her on the show. I'm supposed to be promoting successable people who love what they're doing. Closes. I was like, Jesus, Krimsey, you're killing me. But I'm happy that you're happy now. So you reached out to me, your publicist reached out to me like a couple of days after, letting me know that you have this cookbook coming out, in that she listed all the things that we could talk about if you were to come back on the show. And one of the things she mentioned was that you're promoting this book, in that you're choosing to not use, you're off social media, and you're choosing not to use social media to promote your book. And in today's age, most people would tell you you're crazy, you need social media, there's no way to be successful without social media. And I would tend to lean in the direction where they're right. But at the same time, I'm also probably the only person that I know who's willing to say they're right. And that's a problem.
Yeah.
They're right. That you need to be on social media all the time, constantly promoting yourself to be successful in life. And I think we really need to wake up and go, what are we doing? Like, what is going on? Like, why is it that they are right?
Right.
Let's fucking snap out of this and like be a little aware and conscious of what world we're creating. Like, I don't want to be a part of that world. I don't know about you.
Yeah, no, I mean, you kind of summed it up nicely there. I think, my decision to get off social media, it stems from the fact that the real world is so much better. And I think that
what is the real world?
The real, like trees and dirt and stuff, and like real people face to face, or Zoom for now. I'll take Zoom for now, but much prefer a face to face. But yeah, I find that when I looked back, when I was thinking about deleting my social media, I had a real honest chat with myself where I was like, okay, just think about all the things in your life and like how they came about, and like, what has social media really done for you? And I had nothing. I mean, nothing. Every great connection I've ever made has come from something I've done outside of social media. And sure, there may be like some fringe cases, like perhaps someone, like perhaps we initially connect. I don't think this is how it happened, but perhaps if we had connected via social media, okay, that's one example. But even still, it's because I had a restaurant that had a social media page. I like to think that all of these things would have still come about even without social media. And I think we're told this lie that everything is happening on there, and if you get off of it, then you're like left out of the game, especially for creators. Like, my sister is an artist. I have a lot of artist friends, and I think almost like the unanimous opinion about all of this is like, God, I wish I didn't have to do social media, because what they really love doing is the work they're doing. It's the art, it's the music, it's whatever they're working on. And then they have to turn around and create some sort of way to promote it on this platform that they're annoyed by. So I don't think you actually need it. I think that things happen all the time outside of social media. And sure, maybe they get shared on social media, but they aren't generated there. It's like a phantom event, really, what's happening on social media. So I think I'll be fine without it. But then my backup comfort was that if I'm wrong and you do need social media to be a successful author, then I guess I don't want to be an author. Like, that's not the job that I want, and I'll find something else to do.
Well, a lot of my pushback with social media, and it's weird because it's tough because I'm put in this position where it's my job to go out there and talk to people and to find out what it takes to be successful. And if I'm looking at the data, if I'm looking at what people have told me they do, that's super important, it's absolutely our social media presence. Absolutely, it creates impressions, and we stay top of mind, and we collect contact information, and we can build our list through these methods and tactics. And it 100%, I can't argue that it does not help. Like, it absolutely helps your business. I can't argue that it doesn't.
I'm on the fence about that. I think, so when we first started the restaurant, we had a social media presence, but it was like, we're here,
Yeah.
and it built up over time until eventually we had, a significant following. I think it was like 18,000 when I deleted the page or something, which is, anyone who's working to build a following knows that that's not, you don't just land in that.
Yeah.
But I don't know how much that actually contributed to the success of the restaurant, because I think it was a lot of locals. And a lot of our social media presence were not local. And even up until the day before I deleted my social media, I was still getting messages being like, "Are you open today?" And I was like, well, no, because we closed almost 2 years ago, So I think a lot of the people consuming what we're putting out on social media were not actual customers. And our most loyal customers were just the ones who were there actually in person. And sure, they told people about it. Maybe it was on social media, maybe it was otherwise, but I can't directly link things that happened to us back to social media.
So I'm happy you said that, because I wasn't a compound and say yes, all those things, that if you're willing to do all those things, it won't hurt your business.
Right. I don't think it will hurt. No,
it will drive traffic to your business for sure. Absolutely. And where it gets it's like, it will drive new guests to your customer, to your business. But we all know that the magic is in keeping customers, right? And 80% of your revenue is going to come from 20% of your guests. And those are the people who you touch and see every day. That's four walls marketing. Yep. And I think that four walls marketing takes precedence over social media. And social media should be an afterthought. Four walls marketing. And here's the thing. I know, and I don't open a restaurant, but I haven't opened, I don't run a restaurant, but I know that if I was a restaurant owner and my life was looking at my phone and being down in it, telling the world how fucking great I am, and having to do that instead of being fucking great and looking at people and talking to people who are with me, I think there's a lot of that missing in the world. And right now, I think there's a bigger epidemic happening, or pandemic happening, than COVID. And it's people living in their little fucking digital bubble and not interacting with people, Yeah. And we need this. We don't understand how badly we need this. And I'm a student of human behavior, of anthropology, of studying where we came from to figure out where the fuck we're going. And this isn't the way. Technology is exponential. Humans are linear. Humans evolve linearly. And I think this world that we live in, there's no way that one person can absorb it all and be happy. And it's a real issue. And I feel like there needs to be some pushback. Listen, we are designed to bump up against people, to hug people, to read body language, to absorb. There's so many things that are happening in real life that we aren't even aware of. There's communication that happens in real time, in real life, low road communication, body language that we're just not even aware of. Endorphins, chemicals are literally floating from my body, and you're smelling that shit. And there's things that are happening on a deeper level that we're not even aware of, and we're depriving ourselves of it right now.
Yeah.
And I'm going on a rant, but it's hard for me to say, hey, go out there and spend your whole day talking about how great you are and creating content and living on social media when you're missing out on real life. And I find this is a struggle for me.
I think a lot of people would argue which I've heard this argument many times that, well, I can still be on social media and have this real life. And I don't disagree, but I think like every day I go to sleep wishing I had more time in the day. And sure, I could do both, but every minute I spend on social media, even if it's just preparing a post and not looking at anything else, is time that I would have much rather spent doing something else.
Yeah, I mean, we are all given 24 hours in a day. And one of the reasons why I deleted, and I should announce, I've deleted Facebook and Instagram from my phone. I still have my accounts, but I don't look
That's how it starts.
I don't look at them. And even when I have these things on my phone, I really hardly did. Or when I was looking at out, that's a little bit of a lie. I would look at Instagram. I'll do things on Instagram, but I don't like to engage like that. I don't like to speak. I don't even text my mother. You know what I mean? Like I'm the kind of person to pick up a phone and call.
Yeah, I mean, as you know, I use audio text messages now. That's my new favorite thing.
Yeah. So I don't to think that everybody is hardwired to exist well on social media is, I think, another thing that's like saying 20 years ago, hey, the secret to being successful in life, in business, is being a really good scrapbooker. You got to be really good at creating a scrapbook and go out there and get them. But here's the thing. Not everybody's going to be good at that. Not everybody's going to be hardwired for that. So you have this thing that everybody has to do, but only a small percentage of people actually are good at it. And then that hinges on your success. What's the issue with that?
Yeah. I think it's very distracting. I agree. It's just, you're working on something, and then social media is a fly being like, you should post, or like, how are people going to know what you're doing? I think they'll figure it out.
Yeah, go ahead.
You go.
I think there are some or benefits of social media. Like, it does give you a window into the world that you wouldn't normally be able to see certain things. You wouldn't be able to get inspiration. Like the culinary world has exploded in the past, what we'd call it, 14 years, ever since 2007, when we had the smartphone, and we could peer into the kitchens around the world to see what other chefs are doing. It definitely had a positive impact culinarily on our industry because of people sharing creativity and inspiring each other. But that's a double-edged sword, because at the same time, we're comparing ourselves to everybody else. And here's the thing, that we all know that the people, it's like dating, like a dating app. You go on the dating apps, you find these people, you're like, this person looks great. And then you meet them and you're like, you're nothing like your profile, and that's social media. We're all projecting this image of ourselves, of what we want people to think, but it's not real. But that's the image we compare ourselves to. There's an issue with this shit.
Yeah. It's very complicated. I do think, like you said, there are some benefits. I think that most of the time they're severely outweighed by the cons. But I can think of like subgroups where it's like marginalized communities, or like kind of fringe. There was a time where like the LGBTQ plus community probably found a lot of comfort, and still now in certain parts of the country, going online and connecting with like-minded people. Or like, if social media had been more prominent back when I first went vegan in Louisiana, I probably would have used that as a tool to be like, oh, other vegans out there, cool. So I can see scenarios like that where it's useful. But at the same time, relying on these digital connections can sort of it takes away the motivation to try a little harder in real life, to make real life connections.
And I mean, Dunbar's number, if you guys aren't familiar with it, it's basically that we can only manage about 150 real meaningful relationships in our life. And people, I mean, when you're engaging with thousands of people, maybe, you're connecting with people in Washington and I'm in New Hampshire, and that's possible. But at the same time, like, we're so connected and disconnected at the same time. And the quality of the connections isn't what it used to be. And I think that it's really important to like point out like quality over quantity, so I feel like I'm ranting.
You feel strongly about it. That's beautiful.
I do feel strongly about it because I'm put in this position where I feel responsible to steer people in the right direction, and where I feel like social media is definitely going to have a positive impact on your business. At what cost, I think, is the question.
Right. Yeah.
I just think that, I don't know. It's just, we're not digital creatures. We're human beings. We're physical creatures. And I think it's important to not lose sight of that. And I think balance is important. I think we lost balance. I think we need to kind of move back in the other direction and be with people again. You know?
Yeah, I like that. I would agree with that.
Do you have anything to share beyond that?
Beyond social media? What's that?
So am I making you feel uncomfortable right now? Am I ranting?
No, not at all. No, I think this conversation generally has kind of felt like a lot of things we talked about are things that perhaps a lot of people think about and don't do for one reason or another, like, oh, I couldn't possibly close my restaurant, or I couldn't possibly delete my social media. But I think if people are feeling that tiny voice in your head, like, what if you can totally just try it. I mean, there's a good chance I'm wrong, and social media might, not having a social media might have just broken my author career. But again, if that's true, I don't want to be an author, or, maybe I'll change my mind and get back on. Maybe I'll really miss it. But everything is just not that serious, basically. It always feels really serious until you do it and you move on with your life and you realize it was really no big deal.
Yeah. I've really enjoyed our conversation today. I want to give you an opportunity to let the folks know, how can we connect with you? If we want your book, where do we go? Is there an email list we can get on to say it's published? Is it available?
Thank you. So my website is crimdom.com, like kingdom, but crimdom. And I do have a newsletter there. This year I sent out 6 emails. So it's kind of like, whenever it hits, it hits. And yeah, my book is available most normal places like Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Walmart, Target. I really like hearing about when people requested their local independent bookstore. It's just, it's very along with our theme today. I love that. But yeah, that's pretty much it. No Instagram, no Facebook, as you know.
Yep. Well, Krimsey, thank you so much for reaching out to me to reconnect, to share what's happened since we last connected. I can't believe it was almost 2 years ago. That blows my mind.
Yeah, it was nuts.
Yeah, it is nuts. There is no questioning. You are still unstoppable. And I look forward to your future success and following you and seeing what you're up to.
Thank you.
Cheers.